All right. It's 1:01. I think we're okay to get started. Were you all, Brandon, can you confirm you can see a PowerPoint presentation on the screen?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Leonel Nieto, and I am representing the Solid Community College Data Science and Analytics team. It's good as always to have you all here. We are going to be talking about advancing equity using data. And with me, I also have Brandon Green, who is going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions in the coming slides, just put them in the chat, and then he'll be able to answer some questions on the chat, and whatever other questions we can address, we'll discuss them at the end. So again, the topic of this workshop is addressing advancing equity using data. The problem that we sometimes face is that if we cannot understand equity issues and we can't see them with data, we really can't see their impact. We know that there are equity issues. I mean, we experience them. And sometimes we see our students experiencing data equity issues. We saw some of those issues being brought to light at the keynote and all the presentations this morning. And these are things that regularly occur especially in higher education. So we need to be able to look at the data to address, to come up with, essentially produce strategies to address data equity issues. Moreover, the challenge that sometimes we face is that the data itself is not readily available or accessible. And my goal is to kind of provide some strategies, some ideas on how we can use the data that we have available at Solid Community College to explore it and then come up with some ideas to address equity issues in our institution. And this is important because our leaders and decision makers are relying more and more on data to make decisions. And so they are sort of beginning, in some cases more than others, to use data. They're beginning to kind of speak the data language, right? And so it is up to us to use that same language to surface the equity issues that we see on our day-to-day work lives. So again, in this breakout, I'm going to discuss some of the key strategies that we can use to leverage data and advance equity. By the end of this presentation, I hope that you will be able to walk away with a good understanding of how to use data to advance equity issues, what resources we have at data science and analytics and are regularly making available to staff and faculty at the college to support this effort. And before I dive into that, let me just kind of give you a little bit of an introduction into who we are. So again, we are the data science and analytics team at the college. Formerly, we may have been known, actually we were known as institutional research. We work to enable informed decision-making at Solid Community College by providing data, insights, and analytics to faculty, staff, administration, students as well, to enable institutional effectiveness. And so we seek to improve student learning outcomes using data. And our mission is to create data products, including dashboards, research reports, algorithms, surveys, and also responding to ad hoc data requests from our stakeholders. The data science analytic team focuses on improving data literacy as well throughout the college. And we are happy to discuss any data project with anybody at the college, whether it be faculty, staff, and administration. We also maintain the data warehouse and manage official reporting, including the data submissions to USHI and IPEDS. And if you want to know more about us, you can visit our webpage, the Solid webpage. I put in the URL on the slides, and you can also make data requests in our data request portal. And if you have any inquiries, you can send us an email at dataproducts@slc.edu. So at Data Science Analytics, we are in the business of basically working with data. We do data stuff day in and day out. And our goal is to build trust on the data because we believe the data is a powerful tool that can be critical to help us answer questions and inform action. But like any other tool, data is not perfect, right? Averages, percentages, and ratios, etc., are all going to reflect how the data is collected, what data is collected, and who is reflected on that data. We know that students face inequities in their treatment and opportunities to learn in higher education, and these inequities can be in the form of, disabilities, racial and ethnic identity, among others. So to ensure that individuals have access to equitable opportunities that lead to success in education and beyond, we must use data to address and produce strategies to tackle these challenges. So again, data can allow us to identify areas of improvement. And once we have identified those areas of improvement, we can use them to produce strategies to advance equitable student outcomes. So when we analyze data in the realm of education especially, we must always make sure that we include student identity and culture to gain a fuller picture of what we're trying to do. And this is something that we heard a few times mentioned this morning in the opening remarks and speaker keynotes. Identity is critical, and it's easy to overlook identity and culture when we analyze data. But remember, most of the data points that we look at, whether it is retention, whether it is graduation rates, admissions, all of these data points deal with a person, a student, or a group of students who in turn have an identity. So think of your own identity. It drives a huge majority of what you do, who you interact with, how you navigate your day-to-day, and ignoring identity in data and analytics means that we ignore a large part of the story that the data is trying to tell us. So again, equity-minded data analysis means that we have to include the culture and identity as essential components. So I'm going to lay out some steps that we can take to ensure that we engage in equitable and culturally proficient data analysis. And the audience for these steps really is anybody, because we all work with data. I mean, at Data Science and Analytics, we work with data probably a lot more than anybody else does, because basically that's our business. But everybody in their careers, in their lives, you work with data, you see data all the time. People are talking about data more and more. The steps that I'm going to lay out are by no means comprehensive, but I would encourage you all to pick and choose the steps that best work for your needs, and think about the steps as well, from a from a constructive perspective as well. So the first step is when we consider equitable outcomes, if we don't know who our students are, it's really hard to come up with some good strategies to support successful student outcomes. So I would encourage us all to begin to ask critical questions about who is the population that Solid Community College serves, right? What challenges do they have, given their cultural identity, socioeconomic backgrounds, etc. And during this process, you also have to be very cognizant and keep in mind that we ourselves bring our own history and perspective to this work. So we also know that we also need to know ourselves, our implicit biases. This means that we need to research identity. We need to make sure that we avoid the pitfalls of deficit thinking. We need to make sure that we are culturally intelligent and approach identity by validating the strengths of all individuals that all individuals bring with them. I would further suggest that we take some time to research systemic racism and implicit bias and reflect on your own identities and the various forms of privilege that we have. So again, research identity, understand your population and who you work with. The next step is to be aware of your own implicit bias. Kind of alluded to this idea in the previous slide, but we have to understand that we ourselves have blind spots, right? We have to remember that we have implicit bias, and these are the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, affect our actions, and the decisions that sometimes we make in unconscious manners. Implicit biases are activated without our own intention or control. Sometimes they are intentional, however. They are also very pervasive. We all have them, and they have real world effects on the behavior, on several behaviors in different domains, such as employment, education, and criminal justice, among others. But the good news is that implicit biases are malleable. Implicit biases and the associations that are formed with them can be sort of unlearned. And so it is possible to replace those mental associations with new ones. But to do this, one example may be that we read about, discuss, and highlight examples of racial and ethnic minority or groups and portray them in a positive light. The next step is to frame and challenge. And what I mean with this, well, I mean that we have to challenge the assumptions and stereotypes that we bring to the table, right? There should be some ground rules, essentially, whenever we look at data. For example, should we be silent when we hear a colleague blame home circumstances or high school where a student came from, or a learning disability as reasons for why students make the same progress or less progress than everyone else? As an equity-minded data analyst, and as an equity-minded individual who works with data, we really have to be challenged. We have to be prepared to challenge those assumptions and be prepared to start respectful and empathic dialogues that unpack people's perspectives. It's going to take some time to dismantle deficit mindsets, but in doing so is essential for it. It allows for promoting equity. Okay, set intentions. This is the next step. And when you do this, you are more likely to make choices that support your intention. You may forget about the intention today, but some part of your brain helps you remember it as you work to analyze your data. So for example, when we set an intention to, let's say, we want to analyze data to come up with a plan to better support the Native American student population who's seeking academic advice. When we do that, our mind is primed to notice those actions, right? And to notice the opportunities, the people, and the things that we can bring, that can bring about our intentions. Here's a quote that I thought was pretty interesting because it helps highlight the idea of being intentional and setting an intentional. Intentions create an integrated state of priming, a gearing up of our own neural system to be in the mode of that specific intention. We can be ready to receive, to sense, to focus, to behave in a certain manner. And that's from the Mindful Brain by Daniel Siegel. So this idea of setting the intention is very powerful because it kind of primes you to work towards a specific objective. Of course, being mindful of equity in the process. The next step is to be able to use multiple data points, right? For example, let's assume that our objective is that we want to increase student retention, student degree completion. In order to do so, we need to be able to dig deeper to understand the barriers that students face when they're trying to navigate higher education and what things prevent them from completing a degree or completing a degree on time. In order to do that, we have to be able to fully uncover the entire picture, right? Low completion rates is just one dot that pales in comparison to the entire education experience of a student. So we must be able to use multiple data points to begin to provide context to that, right? To begin to provide context to low completion rates. And doing so allows us to discover multiple potential solutions. So what do I mean with multiple data points? Let's go back to this idea of barriers, right? If we want to improve a student completion rate, we have to look at the barriers that students have. And there's several barriers in different aspects, like student retention, financial aid, burnout, part-time jobs, etc. Just looking at some of these single indicators can uncover many problems that we can address. And we can point at those different indicators, such as, retention rates, and the patterns in retention rates by different ethnicities and populations of students. We must also be able to examine those multiple data points to come up with potential solutions to each and every one of those data points, and bring them to the table as ideas to improve student experiences. So again, looking at things from different angles allows us to understand the challenges the students face better, rather than focusing on the larger picture. Let's look at an example of what do I mean with multiple data points, right? Let's say that we have a goal where we want to improve the passing rate of a course or a set of courses. And in this case, I'm showing a KPI, or a key performance indicator of pass rate, where we see that the current pass rate is 55%. And there's a comparison, I believe, to the previous term of 75% or 76 if you round it up. Just looking at the pass rate alone, it's not going to give you a whole lot of context, right? Like, okay, or what is this for? And, you know, the first question that comes to mind is this specific department? Is this a specific course or a specific set of courses? We have, in order to understand the full context of what this pass rate means to us and to students, we have to kind of look at it from multiple perspectives, right? So once we know what this pass rate represents, what courses it represents we have to also understand the attributes of that course, right? Is this for a specific modality? Or if it's not, what does it look like for a different type of modality? So if it's an online course, is the pass rate different? If it's an in-person course, is the pass rate higher or lower? Would the time of the day matter, right? If we're looking at this pass rate, we're looking at it from a perspective of morning courses or late afternoon courses. Would that change? What about courses that utilize OER resources? Would that also cause the pass rate to be different? And there's also the idea of having comparisons, right? Because just looking at the number, we don't know if it's good or bad. Like maybe 55%, it's a pretty healthy pass rate. The comparison to the previous term tells us that it's not, that it should be higher. But what if we compare it to other schools who have similar courses? And then lastly, we really want to look at the student attributes, right? The students who are taking these courses, what do they look like? What is the average course load of the students? What kind of engagement do they have in the course? And what kind of participation do they have? If it's an online course, are they participating in the online content? And so on and so forth. So having those different data points allows us to better understand pass rate and come up with strategies to address the issue. So let's say that we find that there's a huge difference between online pass rate and non-online pass rate or in-person pass rate. We may be able to come up with some strategies to address those different issues, right? So if it's challenging to take courses online, we may be able to provide some guidance to students to be able to better engage in online content, or also work with the teachers to make sure we provide good, accessible content on the online learning platform. All right, so the other step that we have laid out to advance equity with data is to disaggregate. Disaggregating data is essential to understanding how we as an institution serve different groups of students, especially students who have been historically underserved in higher education. So when we look at a metric, for example, a strategic metric of 6-year completion rates, like we saw earlier in the opening presentations, we can advance equity if we begin to ask these deeper questions about those metrics, such as, for example, with regards to online courses. Are students with disability engaging in online courses more or less? Are first-generation students of color retaining at Sully Community College at a lower rate? Are male students dropping out of science, math, and engineer courses at a higher rate? So again, we do the same exercise that we did earlier, but we do it with a broad set of metrics. We just disaggregate and look at that metric from a different angle, from a specific subpopulation of the college. And that can really begin to uncover ideas and strategies to help you address the issue and advance those metrics or support student outcomes a little better. All right, we talked a lot, and it's now time to do a little bit of a demo and an exercise. I'm not gonna ask people to participate, but you're more than welcome to participate. We're gonna do a little bit of, let me see, how am I doing on time? We're gonna do a little bit of a virtual data walk. And a data walk is essentially something that I kind of modify a little bit for a virtual session, given that we are not in person, and we're just gonna kind of work with what we have. So a data walk is an interactive way for data stakeholders to engage in dialogue around data regarding their community. And in this case, our community is Solid Community College, right? And the population that we serve. This idea comes from a teaching technique that exposes groups of stakeholders, like teachers, faculty, and staff of the college, to large amounts of data on a variety of media. And typically, we would have an in-person session where all of these media or data would be media posted on walls. Obviously, we don't have any posters right now, but the idea is the same. As stakeholders, we would then share ideas and responses to questions from small groups with the material afterwards, and facilitate some sort of discussion. We're not gonna dive too much into discussion, but I would encourage you all as participants to either put in questions in the chat, or we can address questions by unmuting yourselves at the end if there's any, or even comments if possible. So I'm going to show you data and encourage just discussion as we go through the different data. Think aloud, review the numbers, and just see if you can react. The reason why I thought this would be a good idea is because the goal of a virtual data walk is to help us gain awareness about ourselves, who we are, where are we starting from, right? And really develop common knowledge and language around shared understanding of the problems that we as practitioners of practitioners in higher education want to address. We'll all be able to build relationships with others. I don't know if that would be entirely possible in a virtual setting, but it may be, right? Build relationships with each other around things that we care about, and share goals. This in turn will allow us to understand what kind of similarities do we have, and what kind of differences do we have in how we perceive, experience, and interpret data. And ultimately, this will allow us to produce better solutions to some of the pressing problems that we see in the classroom, that we see in higher education. We should also be able to acknowledge the impact that we have had together and that we can have in the future. This is also an opportunity to acknowledge the emotional impact that the information may provide, right? For us as individuals, but for us as a group. The data walk will also allow us to understand the facts and identify with where more data is needed and what kind of data, additional data is needed. So by the end of this virtual data walk, modified virtual data walk, hopefully we can reach an agreement about what data to use to inform strategy, and what data we would want to gather in the future to track progress towards improved student outcomes. As we go through these slides of the following slides and the tools that I'll be showing you, be sure to think about some of these questions, right? What does this tell you about the topic? Say we're looking at enrollment. What does the visual tell you about the topic? What about enrollment? What more do you wish you knew about this particular topic? What are some bright spots that you see in the data? What areas of concern do you have in the data? And what will you want to do with what you've learned? All right, so I'm gonna go in and out of the slide deck. because I want to show what I'll be presenting. So let me see if I can zoom in so we can continue to see this slide. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to show was the HSI, and there's the typo, apologize, the HSI strategic metric leading indicators, which is going to be on a web page. So I'll open that up. I may have to stop presenting and start over because you may not see it. Give me 1 second. Let me try that again. Let's see. You see my browser? Somebody confirm?
There we go. Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So this is the becoming an HSI strategic metrics dashboard. There's quite a bit of data on this one. We just kind of build it to provide some context around HSI and how the college is doing with regards to the metrics that the college has. So the first thing we have is a 6-year completion rate. You should see that almost everywhere. But this is only for the Hispanic or Latinx students at the college. There's an upward trend. But what I think is more interesting is that the leading indicators to this, right? So the 6-year completion rate is a lagging metric, meaning that we're looking at it after the fact, right? There's nothing we can do. It's 24%, 2021, there's nothing we can do because it's after the fact. But we do have some leading indicators, and we are working to build more leading indicators in the future, because we want this to be a discussion about what is it that we are doing on our day-to-day to impact the 6-year completion rate, right? Examples of a leading indicator are, I think we only have one right now, but we have first-year retention rate, right? So if you want students to complete within 6 years, we first have to make sure that they're staying for 1 year after they come into the college. And when you look at this, leading indicator, you can actually go in here and look at the definition of that indicator and say, well, this is a percent of the BFA cohort students who continue to be enrolled at Solid Community College 1 year after their cohort term. And we see that there's a trend for the last few years, and we see the actual number, which is 63%. So 63% of the BFA cohort of Latinx students stay for 1 year at the college. And we can further look at that by a subpopulation. So if we look at the first generation subpopulation of Hispanic and Latinx students, there's a bit of a difference there, right? So 62%. Non-first generation, it's a little higher, it's 65%. So first generation students are a group of students that we could probably support a little better to help them retain at the college that first year. We also have the transfer conversion rate. Again, this is the percent of Latinx, Hispanic and Latinx students who earned an associate's degree from Solid Community College and go on to earn a bachelor's degree within 4 years after completing their award at the college. And again, we also have some leading indicators that would help us assess progress towards that. And the leading indicator is that they transfer within 1 year of graduation. So not only do we want them to graduate from the college, but we also want them to transfer within 1 year to a 4-year institution. And you can see there's also a trend, and we have the actual is 50%. We don't have any targets yet because, again, this is a conversation. What is an adequate target? The target may be different for different populations. And this is where having conversations with stakeholders and data folks around the college will be really helpful to help us understand what would be an adequate target to work towards. Again, there's some differences between first generation and not first generation that you can explore. We also have this align and respond with the workforce needs. So the percent of CTE graduates earning a competitive wage. Jeff talked about this one at the opening remarks. And likewise, we have a leading indicator, and the leading indicator is the percent of Hispanic and Latinx students who are in a high demand program. And that has been growing. It is currently at 22%, which is good news. We have the two equity strategic metrics with only one leading indicator, and that would be the percent of Hispanic and Latinx faculty at the college. And the definition of that is the percent of faculty teaching in the fall that identify as Hispanic or Latinx. And so currently we're at 24%, and that's a growing trend, which is good news as well. And then lastly, we have the annualized FTE. So the annualized FTE of the Hispanic and Latinx student, this is a budget-related metric, and that's looking at credits and so on and so forth. And a leading indicator to this is, so if you hover over this, it tells you the actual number. So right now is 14,268 compared to 13,000. So the leading indicator to this, we have two leading indicators. We have the HSI annualized FTE, which is essentially the same as this. It's not really an indicator, a leading indicator, but we copied it here to be able to show the difference between first generation and non-first generation. And then another leading indicator that we have is the application yield. So the application yield is the percent of fall term accepted applicants who enrolled in a class in that same term. And that has been declining. This is probably the decline that we saw in the last couple of terms is probably primarily due to the fact that we made applications free and more students applied than enrolled. But we can see that there are some differences as well between first generation and non-first generation students. So that's the strategic metrics HSI dashboard. We're also working to come up with non-traditional metrics for supporting the effort of becoming a Hispanic serving institution. And we are looking for feedback. So again, you have our contact if you have ideas about what would be some good non-traditional metrics apart from the traditional strategic metrics of the college, such as belonging, such as inclusivity, students feeling like their voices are being heard. Please be sure to reach out to us and we can support you with that. Or hear your feedback. All right, so the next thing that we have for the data walk, hopefully we have time to cover all of these ones. The Factbook. If you're not familiar with the Factbook, hopefully this will give you a good orientation. The Factbook is one of the biggest tools that we have to provide data to our stakeholders, and that includes faculty and staff at the college. There are several archived versions of the Factbook, and our awesome person in institutional reporting, Deborah Summers, has been working as well as Brandon have been working really hard to build a Factbook every year. Currently, we have the 2021 version published, and we're working on the 21-22 version right now. It will be ready in the next couple of months. But the Factbook has some really interesting information that you can begin to explore and again, from an inequity perspective, analyze to see if you can uncover some strategies to support students better. So let me dive into student enrollment. So when you go to the Factbook, there are several areas of the Factbook. There's student enrollment, demographics, faculty, degrees, and so on and so forth. But in student enrollment, we can actually look at some enrollment trends, right? Who is coming to Solid Community College? Well, this one doesn't have disaggregations, but we do have the overall trends. If we look at student demographics on the Factbook, that's where we begin to see some disaggregation. So we have the fall headcount by gender, ethnicity, and race. This is the dashboard that shows us the headcount of students broken down by race, ethnicity, and gender. And we have up in 2021. And I believe we can go back 5 academic years and see different patterns. But you'll see that the majority of our student population is white, non-Hispanic right now. We're at 66% in terms of the students that we serve. Again, this is part of that first step, right? Understanding the population. Who are we serving, right? We're serving primarily white non-Hispanic population. And then the next biggest group is the Hispanic students, and so on and so forth. But our college is diverse in general. We can also look at the degrees, right? Who are degrees being awarded to? Who is getting the degrees? So if you look at distribution of graduates by degree and major, this will give us an idea of who is getting certain degrees, right? So for example, if we look at accounting, we have a drop down here that allows you to explore different majors. Let's look at computer sciences and engineering. Computer sciences and information systems. So here we'll all be able to explore the distribution of grades by gender. It's kind of dark, but that's 80, and this is 371. So you'll see that in the computer sciences and information systems, the vast majority of students are male. All right, let's see the next one that I have, and I'll be able to share the slides hopefully somewhere where you can get to some of these links. The next one that we have is the academic report. The academic report is in our page that we call the performance page. So if we go to in our browser, sorry, have to move my. If we go to performance, SLC.edu, this is where you're going to find a lot of the products that data science and analytics has built over the years. And we want to go to the academic report. The academic report offers a little more granularity and detail on degrees and awards, as well as reporting by department. Let's go to computer sciences again, computer science and information systems. So you'll see that there's the annualized FTE, as well as some other metrics, student to faculty ratio, average class sizes, and so on and so forth. So a lot of information really that can help us kind of understand the population of the college better, as well as some of the performance metrics that are being monitored. There's also the student surveys. I think the student surveys is one of the most interesting metrics or interesting reports that we have. Same thing, if we go to performance.slc.edu and click on annual student surveys, we have annual surveys that we build and update regularly. For example, we have the new student survey. This is good to help us understand who are the new students that are coming to the college. One of the things that I thought was particularly interesting I don't know, oh yeah, it wasn't on this one. I think it was a different one where I had a map. We have a map of where the students come from in the Valley. So that one was pretty interesting. So the new student survey is one. And then the other one that was also very interesting to look at is a non-returning student survey, as well as the climate survey. The climate survey can give you some really good information about how students perceive higher education, right? Like, do you feel welcome at SLIC and safe on campus? And then you can further disaggregate different groups, right? So let's say we want to look at students only. So I'll look at students. And then let's say we want to look at non-white students. I'll just uncheck the whites. So this is not too bad. 73% of students are reporting that they feel welcome at Solid Community College. We had 872 responses in that 2019 climate survey. So lots of content, and I know that we sometimes don't have time to look at these things, but if we want to understand the population at the college better, the performance site is one place where you can go into and really nerd out with some of the stuff that's on there. I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions that we want to bring and address. I'm happy to either have a conversation or try to answer some of your questions, either around our data products or around some of the information I presented.
Hear me?
Yes.
There was a question and I wasn't able to answer about where the new strategic metrics dashboard is. It doesn't look like it's in the same place as the previous one on the performance website. Is that currently up and running for people to access?
It's not yet available. That's a good question. We have the updated strategic dashboard that has all the metrics. So if you go to slcc.edu plan, that has the updated metrics, but it doesn't have the HSI dashboard, because that's the HSI is very specific. The Hispanic Serving Institution is very specific to the becoming a Hispanic Serving Institution. So yeah, that you would not find that in here, those metrics in here, but we will make that available in the data portal and the performance page, so you can browse through it. And then again, it's got a link on my slides. So I will I'm happy to find out where we can post these slides so you can look at the content that we discussed.
The current strategic goal metrics dashboard is on the performance website, and I will put that in the comments. It's less robust than this newer version. And unfortunately, it does use the Yushi ethnicity, which doesn't treat race and ethnicity as two separate categories. But if you feel that there's value in that, I'll put that in comment.
Yeah, it's a good idea. We can put some of these URLs in the comments as well. I'll put in the HSI one in the comments if anybody wants to refer to it and explore it. Well, we have a couple of minutes. I'd love to take more questions if there are any. Thank you all for joining us in this conversation. And I hope that the information that we provided was useful. You're more than welcome to reach us at dataproducts.slc.edu if you have any questions.
There was a question from Emily about how to get your own data. Are you requesting about how to make a data request, Emily?
No, there's a program that we were shown to see like our own students or classes data to see like how equitable various things were. And I can't remember how to get there. And I don't know if that's something you guys do or not. It might be totally separate, but.
Are you an instructor?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so that would be the faculty insights dashboard. I'll send you, I'll put the link on the chat.
Okay, thanks.